This countdown is as long as a movie. This is my last time doing this countdown, so I'm giving it all I've got. And I'm a super passionate Zelda fan. If you want to take breaks, that's up to you. In case you do, here's a table of contents to help you get back to where you were at. Enjoy the countdown.
For example, when I met Zelda, I knew they were going for the sweet, lovable, innocent, non-princess version of Zelda. But to be honest, I thought she was a jerk. First off, when she pushed me off the edge, the way she did it seemed like the game was trying to make me think, oh, she's so innocent and sweet. And here I was thinking, really? Did you really just do that? Did you just push me off at my possible life's expense just to look cute?
Oh, that's so cringy. That was me 3 years ago? Oh. I've been trying so hard to get my top 20 video games done, but I can't! Zelda keeps invading my mind. I guess with Breath of the Wild coming out, it's hard to contain this beast within myself from making a countdown to celebrate the occasion. So, you know what's about to happen. I'm going to rank my personal top 20 Zelda games of all time for the final time. The gloves are off. I'm going to judge everything that affects my ranking for each game. The music, the controls, my video game preferences tied to the game, the concept, the dungeons, the items, the graphics. I have spent the last 3 months beating every game in this series, so I'm on fire and ready to deliver my fresh perspective, so you better be ready. There are 2 rules. 1, there are 19 official Zelda games in the series since Breath of the Wild came out. I am removing 4 swords from the list because I consider that a minigame and there's not really anything worthwhile to say about it. To add it up to 20, first I'll be adding the CDI games as one collective entry. I've never talked about the CDI games and I really want to expand on them, and they are not the bottom entry. So that'll make this list interesting. The second game that's getting added to the list is Hyrule Warriors because I'm a Dynasty Warriors fan, and it made an interesting reputation of itself back in 2014, so why not put it in? And rule number 2, and this is crucially important, I did not grow up around the internet's influence in my life while playing the Zelda series, so my views are considerably different from the internet norm on how they judge Zelda. So here's the second rule. Expect any Zelda game at any time. This means that popular games could hit rock bottom or that more ignored games could soar up high. Which means that if you happen to be sensitive to what Zelda games should be more popular than others, consider this a friendly warning. I'm going to kick you in the balls with this video. So just a heads up, there will be a considerable amount of disagreement in the comments of this video who will ignore this rule. It happened in 2014, it will happen here too. Just letting you know that. With that, let's get started with my top 20 personal favorite Zelda games of all time. Personally, I was really surprised that this Zelda game dropped to the bottom of the barrel, having played all of the Zelda games in the last 3 months. I tried so hard to keep it away from the spot, but I can't. I can't lie to you guys. I'm going to stay honest all throughout this list. One Zelda game has to take the fall. There's no avoiding it. My least favorite Zelda game is The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap. I know, I'm shocked too. I put this at my number 8 spot in 2014 and wow, what a turnaround. What happened here? How did this game shrink itself down to the bottom entry? Minish Cap in itself is an awesome experience. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoy most of the dungeons like the Deepwood Shrine and the Temple of Droplets. They're really thought out dungeons. Love their music, love their implementations, really good puzzles, and the ambience is pretty sweet. The Cave of Flames has a gorgeous atmosphere presence that I get a strong kick from, and I love using those claws with the Fortress of Winds. Really good times. It's not just the dungeons. Climbing Mount Krenel is one of the big highlights of the game. It controls beautifully with every attack feeling like they connect, and the graphics look pretty good. The game's presentation definitely stands out. But the negatives, even though they are small, it really starts to add up for the overall experience. First, the kinstone pieces. Now they do have an interesting appeal. Using them to open up areas is a neat gimmick for the series. But after replaying the game, I noticed it starts to boggle down the exploration. Usually when you see a treasure chest in Zelda, you get excited or intrigued to open it. So I do. But it's a kinstone piece. Oh, okay, that's cool. You find another treasure chest and oh, it's another kinstone piece. I guess that's pretty neat. Another chest. I wonder what it is. Kinstone piece. Like I said, it's a small thing, but it adds up to the point where I get really annoyed with the mechanic. But that's not the only thing that bugged me over time. The Minish Cap did as well. Like the kinstone pieces, it is an honorable display to the execution to the exploration, but it felt like a chore after a while, and like before, the momentum started to snowball into being a nuisance to my experience. I think it's because it doesn't really add anything to the feature over time. So whenever I come across a small hole I needed a panel for to change size, I kept subconsciously thinking, great, now I've got to backtrack all the way back here, then backtrack all the way over to the spot I shrunk down for. Some of these moments are long-winded too, especially in the town and getting the library books back. If the cap involves something original like the Temple of Droplets, it becomes an innovative experience with the shrinking experience. But because the exploration in the overworld is a backtracking travesty, not my cup of tea at the end of the day. And I guess the last reason is that I hate the Palace of Winds dungeon. I hate the music. I hate the overpowering quarter-like feel. I hate the cape item. I hate the long lane. I hate the repetition hell in this place. It was a major obstacle in my completing the game recently, but I'm not going to go into details here. I already explained it in my hated dungeon, so you can see it there. Overall, Minish Cap is an awesome Zelda game, but it's marred with a lot of small speed bumps from the kinstone pieces and with the Minish Cap mechanic that makes the road trip to exploring the world borderline unbearable over time for my taste. If it added more innovation with the collecting of the kinstone pieces or added more features with the Minish Cap, I could dig it, but the game to me is a redundant backtracking nightmare. Sorry Zelda fans, I know some of you love this game, and cool, I respect your opinion, but Minish Cap, not for me. Link Between Worlds, a wonderful topic of mine, yippee. I know, you're going to say, A Link Between Worlds is bloody brilliant on all fronts as a Zelda game, and I have to say, you are absolutely right. Except for one crucial part, but I'll get to that in a second. First, I'll say that I do like the updated controls to this game compared to A Link to the Past. The full 360 degrees makes the game very comfortable to play, and the enemy types are a lot more manageable for my taste to keep the game going strong, so that's a big plus for me. Second, I do love some of the dungeons from this game. I think their concepts are interesting, especially with the Dark Palace, and the aesthetics that work with the mechanics is masterful. Also have to give props to the Swamp Palace and Turtle Rock. Very enjoyable dungeons as well for standing out for some of my favorites. The third thing I thoroughly have to give credit for is searching out the Maya Mai's around the two worlds. Probably my biggest highlight of enjoyment from the game, especially with the little chirps they give off. Aw, so cute. Fourth, the 60 frames per second is a big step up in technical development to immerse the Zelda player into the more fluid world, flushing out the charm of this game to the max. Fifth, having items situational to open up different dungeons with the freedom inherent to choose where you want to go is wonderful. It's a faithful recreation of A Link to the Past packaged through and through to make the nostalgia gush out in waterfalls to immerse Zelda players and newcomers alike. It's an A-ranked Zelda game across all boards, and it shows all signs of being one of the greats. But there seems to be something wrong here. Isn't this game supposed to be like, on the opposite end of the spectrum with this list? What's the big deal? Okay, so for this, let's turn to Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 6 is very notorious for being the worst game in this series for many Resident Evil fans. Why? It has the title of Resident Evil, it looks like Resident Evil, but it doesn't play at all like a Resident Evil game. It doesn't matter if the graphics look awesome, and on the technical level it works really good, but it took the survival horror roots of the series and brutalized them by all accounts by replacing it with action elements. And to a Resident Evil fan, that is unforgivable. So the reason I'm not a fan of Link Between Worlds is because it has the title of Zelda, it looks like Zelda, but to me it doesn't execute itself at all like a Zelda game. Let me explain. The 60 frames per second is exclusive to this game, right? Meaning Link is booking it lightning fast as he moves around from area to area, room to room, and steamrolling over enemies so fast it would make Sonic proud. What then happens is that a game crisis starts in my head. While I'm playing, it's supposed to be a Zelda game I should be looking through this for as a lens, but my mind subconsciously shifts to another game while playing this. A game sub-series I don't enjoy, which is top-down hack and slash dungeon crawlers. Do you know Gauntlet from the Nintendo? I'll use that as an example. Gauntlet is a top-down rush through every room as fast as you can kind of game. I don't like Gauntlet. I find it a really uninteresting game and I never got the appeal behind it. Link Between Worlds vividly reminds me of a Gauntlet-like game. It comes off to me as a watered-down 3DS Gauntlet game. So because of this, I lose interest in this game in record time compared to any other Zelda game. From the first minute I picked up the game in 2013, this curse has never left me. Just like Resident Evil 6 to Resident Evil players, this game throttles me the wrong way about Zelda. Usually when it comes to Zelda, I think slow and take your time and appreciate the environment, but with Link Between Worlds, it's nothing like that for me. It's like rush, 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 which completely shatters itself in my mind that this is a Zelda game through and through. Let me get this straight. As for everything else, they're fine. The merging mechanic, the renting of the items, the mini games, and the exploration like the Mai Mais work as they're supposed to. It's just that this issue I have blankets out everything else. At the end of the day, I know A Link Between Worlds fans frown at me for not praising this game like everyone else, but I hate to break it to you, but Zelda players do play other video games. And sometimes those video game preferences we don't like are going to bite us in the ass in games that we do love. And unfortunately, this one has its teeth sunken so deep that it leaves a nasty bruise. Wish I could like Link Between Worlds, I really do, but not a fan of it. This is another surprise from my 2014 list. I had ranked this number 6 at the time and now it too surprisingly went way down, but not for the reasons you think. Let's get one thing clear. I do thoroughly enjoy Four Swords Adventures from start to end. Just because I rank it at number 18 does not mean I hate it or find it uninteresting. In fact, I love it. It's simply missing some crucial parts that makes the other Zelda games stand out more for me as more complete experiences, and that's it. So let's start with the positives. If you've seen my countdowns, then you know that I enjoyed this game a lot more than the usual Zelda player, and I'm more forgiving of it because I adore beat 'em up games, so bring it. Another reason I'm more lenient with it is because I don't mind linearity because I'm a retro gamer, so that doesn't ruffle my feathers personally. It was really fun to play, both back then in my teenage years and even playing it recently. I also partially don't agree with a lot of other Zelda players that the game is repetitious. I personally think that the environments and items are different and engaging enough. Not the best, I agree with that, but enough to keep the interest rolling. The obstacles, enemies, and items mix up the experience from level to level. I really adored the boss battles, and overall it was a roller coaster ride full of thrills. I had a good time, and if it went on longer, then I would have indulged myself more into this game. And speaking of longer, this is where the negatives start settling in. It's a short game, around 10 or so hours long. Unfortunately, this doesn't compare to the other Zelda games at how long they last, hands down. It was a true disappointment, it really was, that I couldn't play it longer and I would have ranked it higher if it did. but it didn't. The second major problem is loneliness. Long ago in my 2014 review of the game, I reflected back all those years ago when I had played the game with friends, leaving behind those glorious feelings giving it out to the number 6 spot back then. When I went back to replay this game recently, those distant memories since then makes me sad and wish for those times to come around again, and it's a total buzzkill. The experience is day and night and playing this game alone or with your best buds. It's like playing Super Smash Bros. In single player or with friends. It makes all the difference in the world, and I miss that. Let's see, any other criticisms? Not really off of the back of my mind, but having a short and lonely game just bulldozes the whole experience somewhat. And it doesn't help that it's not a very memorable game either. I really wished it was longer. I really wanted to play with my friends and re-experience that grand, glorious, nostalgia days I once had. But those days are over, and it makes me sad. Oh. Should I do a big build up to this entry? No, I've already mentioned it in the second rule. Expect any Zelda game at any time. So I'm not going to fuss about it. If viewers expected me to break this rule and put the CDI games at number 20, well, I don't know what to tell you. If a person gives you a rule, I can't guarantee keeping more of your sanity intact if you choose to ignore them. So when a lot of Zelda viewers see this entry, they're probably thinking, Slashstar, I understand that you haven't been around the internet's influence in hating these games, but I think you're putting the CDI games higher on the list just for the sake of feeling good about yourself for being rebellious to the majority. Fair point, since I don't like the internet's views very much and I have a rebellious spirit. But I am genuinely saying that I do like the CDI games a considerable amount on my own terms. I think a lot of this is because of my major upbringing in a certain video game category compared to a lot of other Zelda players. I played a ton of Flash games in my teenage years on the internet from Newgrounds or substandard games. It was an awesome way for gamers to try out new games if they didn't have any money to buy any official games. Some gamers were religious with Newgrounds, some fans linger around it today, and I was one of them back in my early years. And I think that's the big difference. I look at it as an exceptional, charming Flash game compared to a lot of other garbage games I played on Newgrounds, and the internet, no offense, I imagine we're spoiled with AAA games and being continually influenced by negative reviews of the games, are not as lighthearted with these quality of titles as I am. So you could say I have grown up around low expectations with video games on the technical level. I played a lot of hit and miss Nintendo games from my experimental days too. Now the CDI games are not Flash games, I know that, but it plays and executes itself so remarkably close to one, I can't help but judge it that way. So for me personally, it kind of has that nostalgic charm for me from those good old days as a teenager when I played it for this countdown. So believe it or not, the reason I'm not flipping my lid about the CDI games is because I'm desensitized to these kinds of problems. I've seen them all. The hitboxes with flying enemies is god awful, some questionable control schemes, the overusage of the lantern in continually darkened areas, the zero invincibility frames, having to grind for some disposable items like the robes, and the landscape is hard to distinguish sometimes on where to go. These kinds of problems are really common with the realm of Newgrounds games. I do understand if these problems get a Zelda player's rage flowing, but speaking from personal experience, I'm too adapted to care. I lived in the realm of substandard games for a good chunk of my life. All this stuff just bounces off of me just like the air we breathe. So on to the positives, and yes, I do see some. Compared to other Flash or substandard games, there's no delay in the controls. Thank God for that. The presentation is pretty good. I mean, there's actually distinguishable shapes. It's a lot better than staring at basic triangles and circles the whole time. The animations actually animate as they move across the screen. It's an improvement over still images scurrying across the screen like a caterpillar. There's definitely a structure and an objective laid out in front of you, both as you travel on the battle screen and the overall progress of the game. So the immersion of adventuring is definitely there, for me at least. Some Zelda players found the cutscenes to be infuriating, but I found them pretty funny. It reminded me of the cheesiness I adored from Monty Python. Remember the rabbit?
He's got huge, sharp... he can leap about... Look at the bones!
Go on, boss, chop its head off.
Right, silly little bleeder. One rabbit suit coming right up. Look! Jesus Christ!
The last and one of the biggest things about this game is that the music is pretty damn catchy at points. Okay, fair enough, but above Minish Cap, A Link Between Worlds, and Four Swords Adventures? That's really pushing it, don't you say? Yes, that's a critical question, and here's the reason. Those negative points I mentioned in Minish Cap, the Kinsto pieces in Minish Cap, eventually added up to the point where I said, I'm drained of this Zelda game, I want it to be over. Same with Link Between Worlds, there was so much of a gauntlet identity crisis where I said at several points too, okay, I'm done, next Zelda game please. This went for the disappointment and loneliness aspects in Four Swords Adventures as well. With this one, I didn't have as strong of bitter feelings towards the overall experience, which is why I placed it at number 17. The point is that the pros outweigh the cons considerably. Not spectacularly, which is why it's at number 17, but enough that it was an enjoyable, charming adventure to get into. I got invested. I was happy to play through them, and I was happy to finish them. Except for Zelda's Adventure. I played through that game too, and it had its technical flaws too, but there was no positives for me to yank it out from the drowning waters of the unholy Triforce. So that's my case, and since this is the internet, the comment section is going to be very interesting. I look forward to looking at it. So let me start off. I don't hate this game at all. There isn't anything in this game that makes me want to throw the controller at the screen or anything that makes me dislike it. Well, except for that piece of heart for that archery game when 100%ing this game. That can go itself. Majora's Mask is a fantastic game. Let me stress that again. Majora's Mask is a fantastic game. Whenever I start up a new game, I don't have a problem finishing the playthrough, and the gameplay is just as tight as Ocarina of Time, so the controls are very reliable. The 3 masks are pretty cool, and with the negative things I'm going to bring up, it doesn't deter me from having a good time. So I just want to be clear, these are not criticisms I'm going to list in why I don't prefer this game. It simply comes down to a matter of preference. I have a lot of things to say, so let's go. I really wish I could continue on with the positives, but this is number 16, so I've got to dedicate my time addressing that. So let's start with the biggest reason I can't quite get into Majora's Mask. The apocalyptic game just isn't my thing, and never has been. I rented this game at around 10 years old as the second Zelda game I've ever played. I couldn't get into its concepts. I played through the game twice a couple of years ago, and my feelings are the exact same. To be blunt, I'm not capable of getting immersed into this world. Apprehension and dread is something that this game excels at. But, unfortunately, those are elements present in horror games. And because horror games are far from my thing, those things don't work on me. Because I played action games all of my life, I'm desensitized to killing people in video games. Take your pick, GoldenEye 007, Metal Gear Solid, Doom, just to name a few. So after I kill millions of things in video games, how odd do you think this statement is going to be to an action gamer? Oh, in Majora's Mask, people are going to die. So? I probably kill more people in a Grand Theft Auto game session than the population of Majora's Mask every day. So, I'm going to be blunt. I personally find having to worry about people dying in video games very overrated. But, that's because I'm an action gamer, not a horror gamer. If you like the game, awesome, cool, and I respect that. But, it's not for me. So now let's focus on the smaller negatives. The time limit. Again, this boils down to personal preferences. If Zelda players love organizing and being punctual for side quests, then sweet, more power to you. In video games, I personally like doing activities in my own time, so it's not something I'd get behind. I don't mind the time limit while I'm doing dungeon related quests because it doesn't apply to anything specific, so I can ignore it. It's scheduling the side quests where, bleh, not my thing. So finally, let's cover the side quests themselves. There are indeed a lot of side quests, let's get that right, but they're not my kind of side quests. First, because of the time limit I just described. I'm just not a fan of it, and it's a chore. The second reason is that a lot of these side quests are errand quests, which means it involves a lot of go to this location to get something, then deliver it to someone else, at which, sorry, they slog the whole experience of doing them big time for my taste. I didn't like them in World of Warcraft, I don't like them here either. The entire game is plagued with this. I guess I should say it. I had more fun with the Bombachus Bowling Alley and Ocarina of Time than all of Majora's Mask side quests put together. No, I wasn't bluffing. Lastly, I know someone is going to bring up that, oh, don't you feel so good helping people in Majora's Mask with their troubles? No, I do not, because I'm going to pull my action gamer card. Call me having a cold heart, but I'd rather spend my time killing things, doing dungeons, or playing fun minigames, not setting up appointments to save people like some scheduling dentist. Sorry, but I care more about the gameplay being fun rather than ogling over who gets saved or not. Now let's shift back over to the positives while I close. The reason I don't hate or have a grudge with Majora's Mask is because the side quests are optional. You don't have to do them. And I'm extremely grateful for the game in executing that. If I want to play it casually for some good times with the dungeons and masks, then I'm grateful that the game will allow me to enjoy the game that I want to. The reason I ranked it low is that peel off the side quests, there isn't much substance that this game can offer. 4 dungeons won't last you very long. The game is obviously geared for those who dig the atmosphere and side quests, at which, because I'm not a fan of those concepts, it's my least favorite 3D Zelda game by a long ways. I thought long and hard about this one, and I'm extremely confident at where I put this entry. It's funny, I haven't played this game for 12 years, so I thought, hey, maybe I could reinforce it as my number 7 spot from the list in 2014. Instead, it backfired badly. I was reminded thoroughly why I didn't have a craving to play it for 12 years. So let me put this forward. I have no nostalgia with The Link to the Past or with the Super Nintendo. I first played this game in 2003 on the Game Boy Advance port, so I came in with an empty bucket of those gushy feelings that a lot of those Zelda fans share, and that's the main reason it's number 15. Of course I'll explain, give me a minute. While Zelda fans look through this game and call it the unquestionable godlike king of revolution, I have to respectfully disagree, and this is why. A Link to the Past is the 3rd game out of 19 in this series, and while it is definitely revolutionary for the time on the Super Nintendo, this also means that there are 16 Zelda games past A Link to the Past that can build off of the execution of A Link to the Past and potentially make them better. And in my opinion, a lot of things in future Zelda games do some things better, and I'll list a few of them. When it comes to Oracle of Seasons, the items are honestly much funner. Oracle of Ages is stellar with its puzzles. Link's Awakening has a lot more mystery in its exploration, and the 2D and 3D Zelda games make their environments, dungeons, and music a lot more appealing. Plus, speaking of the music, it's a lot more varied in the environments and dungeons later on. Stuff like that. I could go on for a while, and it comes down to subjective opinions, so you have every right to disagree with me. But A Link to the Past feels really basic to me in its execution compared to a lot of other Zelda games. But does this mean that the game is subpar? Oh, heavens no. A Link to the Past is a damn fun Zelda game. The reason I adore A Link to the Past is for its Oracle of Seasons vibe, with its emphasis on combat getting up close and personal with enemies, and it's fun. It works and it is fulfilling. Every time your hits connect, you can feel them jumble that sense of immersion within yourself. The combat works a lot in its favor of its dungeon design, making each dungeon ominous with enemy types and keeping you on your toes on where you keep yourself positioned in these fights. There are moments of dark places, enemies that can ambush you, and the difficulty of the bosses is brutal but engaging. The sense of progress in A Link to the Past is outstanding. In fact, I'd say that is the best thing it does compared to any other Zelda game. When you go through the environment, when you go through the dungeons, you can feel the game tugging at you to explore more of it, and I can't get enough of it. There was a point in my 12 years revisited Let's Play when I was looking for one of the medallions, having forgotten where it was, and I spent an entire part or two exploring the world of A Link to the Past, and I didn't want it to stop. It was the highlight of the game and the number 1 reason I play Zelda. When I explored all of A Link to the Past, I wanted more, and that's when you know that a Zelda game blew an expectation to the city in the sky and back. The dungeons, on the other hand, are okay. There are some great ones like the Skullwoods and Misery Mire as being my favorites that caught me off guard with some cool obstacles, but the rest of them kind of hinge on being unmemorable, and the puzzles, Not very good since they're usually the same basic Switch puzzles. Plus, the length of the dungeons usually being around 10 minutes and the bland generic textures leave more to be desired. However, there is one major negative I have about A Link to the Past, and it's not the game's fault. It is my fault. I'm decent at top-down games, but I'm not the best at them. A Link to the Past, to me at least, is a little wild for my tastes when it comes to the hitboxes and enemy types being a little erratic at some points. I'll let this Let's Play footage speak for itself. It's like a Tower of Era moment. Don't follow me. Don't follow me. Gosh. Get out of there. It's difficult for me to interpret Link's hitboxes with the sword swipes with the enemies I'm trying to connect them with. And no offense, when I get hit a lot from this tires me out from wanting to play the game during these sessions. Out of all the things I have to criticize from A Link to the Past, the fast speed of the game with how it correlates with the controls and hitboxes is off-putting to my enjoyment of the overall experience. Again, I had a blast with A Link to the Past, but there was definitely reasons for me not to have to come back to this after 12 years. The nostalgia isn't there, the controls are kind of wonky, the dungeon design on the walls and rails look kind of monotonous, it just doesn't tug to me like to the other Zelda players. No disrespect at all if you adore A Link to the Past with all of your heart, but I have to honestly say that the further 14 games ahead of this one are superior in my eyes. Technically, Ocarina of Time wasn't the first game I played. It was this one. I remember it so vaguely at around 5 years old because I remember the bridge that goes to the level 1 dungeon. However, I only played it for only 5 seconds at the time and it didn't look interesting at all back then. So I don't really count this as my first Zelda game. Believe it or not, I didn't give this game a proper try until 2014 after my first top 17 Zelda games countdown. The reason I was skeptical to play it is because I have horrible navigation skills, so I was like, a world where you have no map to plot on where anything is? Please. So what started to cancel this out when I played it? The thrill and accomplishment you get burning in your gut and discovering hidden stuff. First, I had to put up a disclaimer. I am not accounting for the randomizer in this countdown. If you look at my Let's Plays, you'll notice that I played this game in 3 different difficulties that randomize the world in different ways. So I'll be judging it solely on the first quest and second quest standards, the original game. But I can account for what the randomizer did and what makes the original game appealing. If I replayed this game 3 times for the randomizer and had drool coming out every time in every playthrough wanting to tear apart and thoroughly explore each new world, that speaks volumes. So I decided to do an experiment for this countdown. I wanted to do the second quest blind to get that fresh perspective to see what would hold up to me in this game by today's standards and what wouldn't. First, the positives. Now this part was what beat A Link to the Past when I was deciding these 2 games. It's indescribable the amount of joy that comes from finding a secret in this game. Whether you want to burn a secret bush revealing something, blow up the right wall, discovering a dungeon, finding items, or overall when you find anything, your blood flows and you can feel it. I personally adore this because of my achievement hunting side. I found the secret, not anyone else or a strategy guide, and there's a strong certain immersion that comes from that any other Zelda game can't rival. Next, if you're not searching for stuff in the overworld, you're likely scavenging a dungeon, and there's a definite level of suspense exploring them. Now this is where the outdated grid-like controls somehow work in the favor of The Legend of Zelda. You know you are not powerful, you know that your movements are limited, and the place is claustrophobic, so it makes the battles grit your teeth when the enemies start showing up in different formations. That's a huge thumbs up for the sense of adventuring. Plus the concept of exploring from the overworld carries over into this mechanic. When you find a hidden explodable room, oh, it feels good. There's 9 dungeons of this. Now that sounds like a good time. But, oh, this game is badly outdated in a few areas. For one, the combat, it works most of the time and it has its up moments. But there are times when it likes to shove its butt in your face sometimes. Because Link moves in a grid-like tanky fashion with 4 directions to move, it gets hard to maneuver around some attacks. Especially the Dark Nuts and Wizrobes. this really doesn't help your case that the walls narrow down a dungeon room to move around. It also doesn't help that those enemies are aggressive, so it makes the controls rather archaic at those moments. Is that the only negative? No. Sometimes this game just likes to troll you hard, and this is especially evident in the second quest. I watched a live session of the owners of Triforce doing a run of this game in his second quest, and it gets interesting. They know how it is. It gets so bad that you have to look up a strategy guide at some points. Did you know that your whistle can open up random holes in the ground in the overworld? Did you know that you have to walk through certain walls to progress in some dungeons? And then the enemies just get ridiculous. Like sometimes there are rooms that have 3 dodongos where you need 6 bombs, but the game decides to lock you in, so you have to die if you don't have the necessary bombs. Yeah, the game has a dark sense of humor, leaving you high and dry sometimes. Yeah, The Legend of Zelda is really fun in some areas, like discovering new things, but I have to admit it has a share of reminding you how tedious and outdated this game can be at some points. So because of that, absolutely a fun game to play with, but it has its moments where it wants to pull your pants down when you least expect it. Oh, Skyward Sword, Skyward Sword, Skyward Sword. You are an interesting case, aren't you? You give off so many mixed messages with your motion controls, with Fee, your linearity. There are so many hairy problems that Zelda players have shaved off of you. Just what could I add to the pile of shavings? What tree hasn't been beaten enough? So I mentioned earlier that I didn't mind linearity with Four Swords Adventures because I'm a faithful retro gamer, and that still holds true here. I don't mind the game being linear as long as the game is still enjoyable in its own right, at which it is. I will agree to it. The game blatantly screams narrow passages and wants you to go in specific directions. While I'm on the topic of linearity, this will lead into why I put Skyward Sword at number 13, and I'll explain why right now. I don't mind the linearity, but it has a very mild-mannered execution about approaching it. The game pretty much boils down to this: walk down a little ways, swing, 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 rinse, repeat, and rinse some more. The overall problem with this is that the combat's debt directs itself off of the sword tutorial at the beginning of the game. I know there is a Skyward Strike, but reflecting off of the target practice fighting style kind of saturates the overall experience. Now, this isn't a very good criticism by itself, because when it comes to the sword in every Zelda game, don't they all kind of stick to their guns from their tutorial practices? True, but Skyward Sword has a certain unique way of going about it. And this comes to the motion controls. To be honest, I don't find them a problem, and they work. The sword telegraphs nice, it gets the job done, and it doesn't really give me any big hassle. But it's not my preferred way of playing out of the series. Well, what gets the job done faster? A button on the controller you can press instantly, or doing some fancy hand movements that take some time for the game to digest? I guess it comes down to a matter of preference in the end, but my hands are built for a controller, not for waving my hand around like some Wind Waker baton. I guess it explains why I'm more of a PlayStation fan than I am a Wii fan. But I think one of the massive positives for me is the charm of the game, and this is the huge reason for why I sort of Skyward Sword up this high. While the linearity could limit the replayability, and I acknowledge that, the graphics in my opinion compensate for it. It's kind of like that favorite nature hike you like to go on. Sure, it goes in one linear direction going from start to finish, but the most important part is the adventure of the hike and appreciating the beauty of it. To some Zelda players, I understand that linearity is more important to you, but I'm on the side of the fence that will say the charm of the game matters more than the linearity. And that's the reason I adore Skyward Sword, is because the vibrant aesthetics bring it to life, especially with the Silent Realms just that sounded trippy. Now, next, I was considering bringing up the characters like I brought up in several of my countdowns, but to be honest, it doesn't really enhance or hold back on the experience on the rating, so I won't expand on those. I don't drool over video games for their stories usually, and you hardly ever see them in the game since Link is off on his own most of the time. Now, time to square off in the negatives. The items are okay. I don't really mind them, but they are my least favorite out of the 3D Zelda games. Again, it comes back to my PlayStation over Wii preferences. I prefer items that get things done and are more practical. Skyward Sword is neither of these. The Beetle itself can be its own Wii Sports remote control airplane minigame. The Magma mitts demote the game to a Pac-Man experience, and the whip is more impractical than anything. It has its limited uses and it doesn't really scream fun for me. Fi? What? Nintendo calls her Fi? Whatever. I like Fi. Some people like Ocarina, some like Ocarina. Whatever. She could be annoying, but as long as you keep the expectation within yourself that she'll disrupt your gameplay, she's okay. But I wouldn't really call that a positive thing to say about her. That's like playing Super Mario Bros. And then the game wants to pause whenever it feels like it. Lastly, oh, this is going to be fun. The final 3 dungeons, the Ancient Cistern, the Fire Sanctuary, and the Sandship, are not my favorites. Call these the most unpopular opinions around, but I'm not a fan of those dungeons. I'm not a fan of the Sandship because I like seeing the natural environments like grass, fire, desert, and water, and the wooden aesthetic just makes the place boring and unmemorable. The Ancient Cistern reminds me strongly of an art museum, art museums bore me to hell. Finally, the Fire Sanctuary feels like padding because we already had a fire dungeon with the Earth Temple, and I found myself doing slow things like jogging, standing on platforms, with the only highlight in it being the big dives, which is few and far between. Overall, Skyward Sword is a fantastic Zelda game, and the charm holds it true for cementing a good time with the game, but it's tapered down with its lack of ambition and easygoing execution that prevents it soaring high to becoming a masterpiece of a Zelda game, at least in my opinion. And there's nothing else I need to say about it. I've covered all my thoughts on it. I think it's old news by now. I thoroughly enjoyed Zelda 2 because I love Twitch gameplay games. And before you ask, that is a legitimate type of gaming. To go over it a bit, Twitch gameplay tests a gamer's reflexes and reaction time when it comes to incoming obstacles down to the milliseconds. So I judge Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link not exactly as a Zelda game, but more as a game like Battletoads or Ninja Gaiden. Basically, if games like these suffocate the fun out of you because they're hard, it's likely you're not going to enjoy Zelda 2 either. So yes, the hate for Zelda 2 is not surprising. I will admit that Zelda 2 is balls hard, but, and this is a big but, I played Zelda 2 so much that it's not difficult to me anymore. I noticed 2 things in my recent playthrough that prove this. 1, I choreographed myself. I knew exactly where to go, where to grind to level up easily, and where to get every item in the game. It made the game's progress as smooth as butter. And number 2, I didn't lose a single life going through Death Mountain. I knew how to manage my health and attacks so well that the difficulty curve is a walk in the park. I completed Zelda 2 in 5 to 6 hours, and to be honest, I had a really fun time doing it. So, this puts me in a weird position. Usually a Zelda player would comment about losing your 3 lives and you're booted back to the beginning, but if this happens to me so little nowadays, how can I factor it into my rating if it doesn't affect me properly anymore? It can't. I could talk about it at the Great Palace where I died plenty of times, but you restart at the Great Palace. So no, I'm not going to complain about the big lake up there. It saves a lot on backtracking. So because of this, the difficulty curve of Death Mountain is also cancelled out. The hassle of getting past Dark Nuts is gone now, and the exploration is fizzled out. Now, as you know, Link has excellent twitch reflexes with the sword. The button input is exact to dishing out the attacks and movements, making the game's execution and control spot on. But understandably, it may be overwhelming for some players. Look at this Dark Nut. You know you're supposed to swipe it offensively past the shield to kill it, but at the same time, you have to look behind its back at where it is going to attack on the defensive front to block it. That's harsh on a player's coordination. So what makes Zelda 2 so hard is that you have to multitask between your offensive, defensive, and jumping capabilities at the same time. It will get harder, and it will get some throwing of the controllers. Just like other difficult games, the thrill of the game is adapting and juggling and pressing on even if the game tells you, stay down, and kicks you to the curb. But you don't. You get back up, you brush it off, and you face the demon again. And when you overcome something impossible, your adrenaline blows up like a volcano and you can feel the lava. You feel empowered, you feel your confidence increase, and it feels good to achieve something that you once thought was impossible. It means you pushed your limits and became better. The dungeons and battles are still really fun to this day, and I don't have the dungeons exactly memorized back to back, so they're still really fun to travel through, and the enemies and multiple pathways keep me alert on my surroundings to keep the immersion intact. There aren't any moments that feel unfair to me. Every time I die or screw up, I legitimately feel that it was my fault that I screwed up, and I prefer those kinds of tight controls in these dungeons and environments. But there is a huge reason why I drag this game way down low, and it's because of this. The end game can go f itself around the time of getting to the Great Palace and finishing it. This place is so massive, the enemies are just mercilessly cruel, and it can literally take hours of trial and error just to map out where to go and survive the enemy onslaught. I know there is a checkpoint at the beginning of the Great Palace, which I really appreciate, but it feels like getting hit with a truckload of bricks, and the payoff to beat it is not fun. And it's because of this huge blemish that I had to pull down an otherwise awesome game down to number 12. It's amazing how one segment in the game makes all the difference. Well, what do you know? Link's Awakening was number 11 on the 2014 list, and now it's still the number 11 game on my list in 2017. Now that's an interesting coincidence. Where to start with Link's Awakening? Well, when I first picked up the game, I didn't like it too much on first impressions in 2011. I had a lot of Oracle of Ages and Seasons nostalgia, that betrayed me, and I started to look at the game through an inferiority lens. The music was weird, the dungeons were weird, just everything was weird. 2011 was around the time where I had a lot of life conflicts going on, so I wasn't exactly right in the head at the moment. Over the years since then, after I recovered from that, I started to relax on my expectations of the game. So, back to 2017. Link's Awakening was one of the first Zelda games I revisited while playing all of the Zelda games within the last 3 months, and guess what? I played this game for 12 hours straight. I'm not freaking kidding. I beat every dungeon, I explored every nook and cranny, and I beat it in one sitting. Plus, I wasn't around this game a lot, so it was a refreshing and somewhat new experience. I was on crack with this game, and I loved every single bloody second of it. It's kind of a surprise that I would describe this game as my number 11 entry. Having said that, So because the Oracle games are my nostalgic babies, this immediately bled into me getting purged into the deepest realms of immersion for me. This felt like the third Oracle's game to me. The controls are spot on and familiar, nothing felt overwhelming, with the pace feeling controllable and comfortable. There are plenty of things to go explore for, and surprisingly, I really enjoyed the dungeons, which is a first for me. I thought of them as underwhelming before, but I buckled myself up for a good time every time I knew a dungeon was coming my way. What a turnaround. Link's Awakening's Koholint Island's strongest points is the amount of exploration and mystery aspects involved with this game. Nothing really makes sense in this game, but instead of that deteriorating the experience, it enhanced it. It made me want to sniff out more and discover more about what was on the island. At one point, you get a Chinchomp as a pet. That's wicked sweet. At another time, you get a group of fish singing to you. That's unusual, but cool. The Face Shrine has a few rooms in it that makes you do a double take on its layout. That's pretty gnarly, and I love it for that. This is what makes Link's Awakening shine bright from the other Zelda games. Positives all across the board. Even the infamous Turtle Rock, which is a really tedious dungeon, didn't squish my overall enjoyment of the game too much. Though I have to admit the mini-bosses scarred me for life. Okay, enough drooling over the pluses. What brought it down? Link's Awakening's soundtrack isn't that great, and unfortunately music is a huge thing in me getting attached to a video game. Even when writing the script, I can't really remember a song from this game I could truly recall, or other times it just felt plain weak. Especially the power-up jingle. It was cute for a little bit, but then it got annoying, so I tried to avoid getting those power-up items. And then it gets depressing when you accidentally pick them up. Another weakness is that Link's Awakening doesn't have a truly strong concept going for it. There's a ton of mystery and a lot of exploration, sure, but there's no mechanics that truly bind it together like the Oracle games, for example. There's no items like the Rod of Seasons or the Harp of Ages at which they interact with their environments, but there's nothing like that here. So it makes the game just that, just exploration and really nothing else to give it that extensive flair to stand it out. So the game suffers in memorability at some points because of that and makes it feel kind of standardish at those points. Just like Skyward Sword, it needed more flavors to leave that lasting impact to get that oomph to cement itself as one of the greats in Zelda for me. And don't get me wrong, this game is extremely fun and I would recommend it to any Zelda player I come across. But unfortunately, it barely missed the top 10. It's a shame, but Zelda games are phenomenal across the board. It's not really that surprising. Now, I want to cover the negatives first this time around. The overworld is not good. It can be a chore moving from place to place, and let's face it, it's pretty much an extended loading screen wherever you go. You'll also hear this in my Wind Waker entry, and this is an unpopular opinion, but the ocean is boring. My preferences in Zelda is to explore the different amounts of environments, and I'm sorry, staring at one bland blue environment while traveling? It doesn't cut it. Plus, there are problems that make the overworld worse. Jolene the female pirate can unexpectedly ambush your ass and it gets annoying when you're exploring. It does have some few high points, I'll admit, like chasing the ghost ship through the fog, some boss battles are fun, and hunting for treasure has its moments, but I don't like boats and never been a fan of them. Sorry, not everyone is born to like boats. Trains are more my thing. Nudge nudge. Woo! Done with the negatives, which means, this is gonna get fun here in a second. When I think about Phantom Hourglass, I think about the keyboard and mouse versus the controller debate. Some computer gamers love using keyboard and mouse, and console gamers like me prefer using a controller. However, Phantom Hourglass added an entirely new control concept through the Nintendo DS, the stylus. Again, just like Skyward Sword with the motion controls, this is a mixed response with Zelda players. Some adored the new approach to moving Link around by touching the screen, some were lukewarm to it, and others flat out hated it. And that's understandable, so I'm going to be upfront. I adore the stylus controls. I adore my Nintendo DS. In fact, the Nintendo DS is my third favorite gaming console from Nintendo, trailing behind the original Nintendo in second place and the Nintendo 64 in first place. So I'm sorry for those who are expecting this entry to tank because of the stylus, but it's so good. It floods my insides with enthrallment and it blew this game along with Spirit Tracks way high up into the charts of Zelda. Now I've heard some Zelda players say that the puzzles and dungeons aren't that great. To be honest, I agree with that. But I don't really care. Puzzles and dungeons don't have to define a good Zelda game. They could, but they don't have to. Hold on. I can hear some Zelda players getting ready to challenge me on that point, so... Okay then, to defend this point, let's turn to Majora's Mask. You see, many Zelda players enjoy Majora's Mask, and that game only has 4 dungeons. That is its weakness from the other Zelda games. But the side quests make up for it, right? And it is still in many Zelda players' top 5 games despite that. So obviously some players don't care that dungeons are missing, despite that is what Zelda is known for. Same thing here with Phantom Hourglass. Despite some elements that are missing, it doesn't mean it's a bad Zelda game for me. I'm more forgiving of it because of the stylus controls and the environments looks pretty good, and it makes up for those shortcomings. And because stylus controls are used all throughout this game, it adds up to having a lot of fun with this game. Now, the Temple of the Ocean King. Believe it or not, take a couple of deep breaths here. Oh, here comes the honesty bazooka. I actually like the Temple of the Ocean King a lot, and it has aged a lot better than I thought when I replayed it in these last few months. At least from my side. Reason number 1. I like short-term time limits and I like pressure. Now I understand that this makes other Zelda players uncomfortable because it makes them tense. And that's no way to relax and play a video game if it breaks immersion for you. But because I adore Zelda 2, I love living my life on the edge and being on the spot. So my mind appreciates the challenge to take it up a few gears. It really comes down to a matter if the gamer likes pressure or not. Second reason, having to choose between original routes and detours is very intuitive and thought-provoking. As you get further into the Temple of the Ocean King, the time limit gets more demanding, and the layout becomes more complex to maneuver through it, eating up that precious time. However, as you get new items from the dungeons, you have the option to find and figure out shortcuts to get through, and it adds a fun strategy to weigh out whether it's better to do it the safe and slower way with the original familiar route, or the more riskier and convenient way with finding shortcuts. Definitely a huge plus for me. Reason number 3. I don't mind going through it several times because it's not as bad as other video games I know when it comes to revisiting areas. Now, I'm not going to mention those video games because I get the gut feeling that I'll be stamping on some gamers' toes, and the interpretation of repetition is different from person to person, so I'll leave it at that. Plus, it'd take forever to explain, at which I don't have the time for. If Zelda players think this is the basement of hell with repetition compared to other games, you have your experiences and I respect your opinion. But I've got to respectfully disagree and say I played far worse, which is why it doesn't bother me personally. So, I'm 28. I played a lot of video games, so in my opinion, the Temple of the Ocean King, it isn't so bad. At the end of the day, it's like getting hit with a pillow compared to a boxing glove. All of a sudden, the pillow, which is the Temple of the Ocean King, doesn't feel so bad when it comes to repetition, so I don't mind it. I adore Phantom Hourglass. I love it with all of my heart. I played this game for hours of sessions at a time and whew, fun times. Fun times. But speaking of oceans from the negatives, let's look at the other oceanic Zelda game, shall we? I can hear the crowds cheering. Slashstar, you promoted Wind Waker from number 16 in 2014 all the way up to the walloping number 9 position. What'd you do? What'd you do to bring it way up? Well, let's start at the beginning. Now brace yourself because it's going to be a bee sting on your nostalgia. You know how a person likes some art styles and not a fan of other art styles? There are some cel shading games I like and some that are kind of uncomfortable for me to look at. I like Sly Cooper and Borderlands 2. They're alright on my eyes, but sorry to break it to you, I first played Wind Waker on my demo disc on my brother's GameCube and I thought it looked so ugly. The problem I have with Wind Waker is the lack of textures, and there are no black lines to make anything distinctive. I'll give you an example. This patch of grass is not very detail oriented. There's no depth or no outlines that make it stand out, and I don't like it. It looks like one static, boring, one-dimensional texture in the environment. I understand that Zelda players are content with it just simply because of the lively colors and shading for that cartoon aesthetic, but I can't. I like details in my video games. I'm a detail-oriented guy, not a color-oriented guy. Different strokes for different folks, I guess. But I will say the cel shading looks a lot better in the HD remake, and I'll be using this version in accounting for the number 9 spot. The upgraded shading with the lighting and greater finesse with the graphics along with the higher resolution does make this game a lot more comfortable to look at. So, about Wind Waker. A lot of Zelda players say that this is an adventure game, but I would call this more as a vacation game, and here's why. Usually when I think of traveling on ships and enjoying the scenery, that's just it. It associates itself more with a light-hearted vacation feel rather than a dangerous adventure feel. The game has a strong exotic feel, so just like vacationing in Hawaii, it boils down to kicking out your beach chair and exploring the islands. But I don't mind, and the game is very enjoyable in that regard. True, I've got my strong hardcore side in enjoying Zelda II: The Adventure of Link, but I've also got my strong casual side as well. Hey, The Sims is my favorite game series of all time, and a lot of that rubs off in my enjoyment of Wind Waker. I thoroughly agree with Zelda players that it's that strong ambience from the environments and scenery that makes the game as grand as it is. So what seals the deal for me with the positives is mainly the graphics, and strong calming environment really does work wonders for it to cement itself up to number 9, and it's good. It's extremely good. It's extremely fun. I love it. But now it's time to sail over to the negatives. After all, graphics aren't everything, right? I guess to some Wind Waker players, graphics are everything that makes this their favorite Zelda game without question. But since I grew up with gameplay over graphics video games in my younger years, this game is going to have to try harder than being just pretty to get some high marks for me. I would have to say the worst thing about Wind Waker is that as much as the graphics are astounding, it's compensated for having some really, the gameplay, it isn't exactly the star of the show here compared to other Zelda games. It feels a little bare bones here. For example, I know a handful of Zelda players relish over the sneaky mission into the Forsaken Fortress, but it's really tedious, it's slow, and I don't find it riveting personally. I already mentioned the ocean from Phantom Hourglass, and it's just as bad here. In fact, I'll tell you how bad. I decided to do some reading homework while I was exploring the overworld in the last 3 months because all I had to do was hold the A button with one hand, so it was easy to multitask. That's not a good thing to say that I was being more productive getting homework done rather than paying attention to the game. That is until the warping and Swift Cell came in, but overall the ocean traveling and sailing lacks ambition in my opinion. The dungeons are really cool to look at, but over time they're starting to age worse and worse for me. In fact, I think they're my least favorite 3D Zelda dungeons, and it doesn't help that there is a shortage of dungeons. I spent a long time trying to contemplate this because it's hard to explain why, but I think it boils down to subjective reasons at the end of the day rather than objective ones. I can't really criticize them like for the aesthetics, the items, and concepts overall, because then I'd be criticizing the entire series for what it always does. You get the idea, and again, I respect your opinion if you think otherwise. It's all subjective. And one last note, and this one's going to burn. Wind Waker is the easiest Zelda game to date in my opinion, so it lacks any flair of difficulty to keep me in suspense. I know that's a cliche label to put on the game, but that's how I honestly feel, and it saps the gameplay quota for me out of it a little bit. And as for Tingle, him, and the Triforce quest. Don't want to get started on that crap in the original GameCube version. That's the stupidest quest in the Legend of Zelda series. The HD remake does it a lot better. I'll give it credit for that, but it still isn't a highlight for me. I understand that other Zelda players are more content with the easygoing execution of the game, especially since the game is more about appreciating the ocean and graphics, but there's kind of a line I've got to draw from my perspective. I don't usually mind a game getting tame with its gameplay, but compared to other Zelda games, it lacks that thorough, grounded, adventuring vibe that I'm jealous of from the other Zelda games. And well, vacation is fun for a while, but I want my adventure back in my Zelda games. Now this one is another surprise for my 2014 list, and unfortunately this is the entry that breaks my heart the most in this countdown, and it tears me apart. No, I'm not happy. Have you ever replayed a game so much that the main concept of what makes it fun gets suffocated? I used to adore this game. It used to be one of the greatest Zelda games that was ever created for me for the longest time, but not anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages. It's a terrible feeling when nostalgia disappears, especially when it comes to a game that you have been looking forward to playing. Everything that I bragged about in 2014 is still very much true. Oracle of Ages does indeed have 2 times the exploration with the past and present, plus a ton of variety in its environments to distinguish them. The dungeon design is fantastic, out of this world. Oh, and the puzzles, legendary. Even today, I would argue that Oracle of Ages has the best puzzles in the series. Since I have a natural passion for hard puzzles, I put my mouth all over this game and lathered it in my slobber. That's how much I liked it. That's a nice picture. but something happened to me when I replayed this game. This is my 4th time playing through Oracle of Ages, and because I cherish this game for its puzzles, there's a problem that came up from my recent playthrough of it about a month ago. I know every puzzle and its solution like the back of my hand. So because of this, the fresh and exhilarating excitement I had about this game over solving its puzzles, it's gone. It's not there anymore. The fun of figuring out puzzles has been throttled to death with my repeated playthroughs. Check this out. Even Dungeon 7, Lord Jabu Jabu's Belly, the hardest dungeon in this series in my opinion, I beat it without getting stumped once and beat it in about 15 minutes. It was after this moment that big flood of disappointment washed over me. It was then that my heart came to the shattering realization that nothing can challenge me in this game anymore. And this was true throughout the experience. I was somewhat bored while going through the first dungeon to the third dungeon. The game was really fun between dungeons 4 and 6, and then it tanked back down with dungeons 7 and 8. Dungeons 4 through 6 had awesome environments, awesome items, and awesome dungeon designs to keep up the momentum of a fun Zelda game. Thankfully, the overworld somewhat saves the experience since the exploration is still intact. Since I'm a sucker for time travel, I do appreciate this game for its environmental flair and traveling between the two worlds, and it works. I like it. However, the reason I said somewhat is that I know where everything is on the general level and where to go. So just like the puzzles, that part has been worn out and oversaturated with me playing the game so much. Also to comment is that I have a couple of small negatives. For one, the soundtrack, it isn't that great. If you look through my top 50 Legend of Zelda songs, you won't find an Oracle of Ages exclusive track inside of it. It also contributed to boredom in some places like the second dungeon where it's a little wonky. I would listen to Oracle of Seasons, the Brothers Games soundtrack any and all day over this. It is leagues better. The dungeon design is pretty good, the bosses are really cool, and the puzzles somewhat keep my interest, but the items don't sell this game in my opinion. I love the Cane of Samaria and the mermaid suit, but there's not really anything else I'd promise as being fun. In the end, it was my fault for destroying my Oracle of Ages love. Puzzles are fun as long as you keep them puzzling, but if you desensitize the puzzles playing the game multiple times, they get demoted to kids' toys in a bad way, and thus the charm gets sapped out of the game. What was funny was that I haven't played Oracle of Ages for a few good years, so I thought it would go up high not having played it for a while. But if I played Lord Jabu Jabu's Belly, the hardest dungeon, with no resistance and creamed it easily, then it's obvious that this game has burned itself into my subconscious. Really awesome Zelda game. Definitely don't regret putting it at number 8. But yeah, I screwed myself with this title loving the game too much, and for that, the appeal has tanked. Oh no, we're not done yet. Oracle of Ages is not the only Zelda game that I've played religiously and shredded my nostalgia with. I've also beaten the passion out of myself for this Zelda title as well. Welcome to my first Zelda game. Ocarina of Time is the first Zelda game I've ever played and beaten, but I've got a fun story with this one. I actually didn't fall in love with Ocarina of Time at first sight. Because I was an action gamer, I was impatient with it as a kid. It wasn't until the Forest Temple that I started to appreciate the series for the expansive world it had. But because strategy guides or the internet wasn't really around yet, it took me around 2 to 3 years to beat it because I would get stuck, put it down for a long while, then try again at several points. It took me around 5 or 6 retries until I finally beat Ocarina of Time. I used a strategy guide which inspired me to finally buckle down and beat it. I was sick of not getting it beat, so I really wanted to get it done. Since then, I've beaten the game around a total of 10 times, and this was because video game players throughout my life wanted me to help them beat it, and this has happened ever since I beat it the first time. I even beat it in college for a group who wanted to see the game through. I'm a nice guy, so why not? I'll help them out. But the trade-in is that Ocarina of Time is old to me. It's boring. I've seen Kokiri Forest several times over. I've seen Kakuri Rico Village more than I can count with both of my hands, and I hate to break it to you, it doesn't matter how great and innovative the environments are, repetition rubs off on people the wrong way. True, there are games that can hold your attention for hundreds of hours like League of Legends, Team Fortress 2, and Skyrim, but those games have the content and versatility to keep those hours of fun rolling. But Ocarina of Time doesn't have close to enough variables like those games to keep the replayability that powerful. But even so, I can't rank this game low. Even though I played this game several times, it still holds up in several areas. The graphics are still really appealing to this day and have held up. In fact, this is the main reason that this beat Oracle of Ages is because whenever I think about the Fire Temple, or whenever I think about the large variety of environments, which is the main reason I enjoyed Ocarina of Time in the first place and got into the series, my heart still melts thinking about those gorgeous locations. Even though the towns and environments are getting old, I can't deny that they still look really good after all this time. The dungeons are also a high point for me too. Even though I know how to do every puzzle left and right and up and down and wherever, I can't bring myself to say that they are boring. The music and designs of them are enough to keep that small candle nostalgia burning alive inside of me whenever I go through them. Especially the Fire Temple, which is my favorite dungeon and probably the highest point of the game to me. Even the Forest Temple, which happens to be my least favorite dungeon, is still a delightful experience to travel through. In other words, I love every dungeon in this game so much that I can't stop admiring and digesting their details. And I also have to admit that the side quests are really top of the line as well. The Bomb 2's bowling alley, the horse archery game, the Gerudo training ground, the fishing pond, and even hunting down the pose in Hyrule Field as Adult Link is really invigorating to play as well. Ocarina of Time is really high up to having my favorite side quests in the series because of how interactive and fun they are. But thankfully, there is a small solution to help make the game a little different to soothe my Ocarina of Time repetition pain, the Master Quest mod. I didn't appreciate the amount of trolling it was throwing at me, but the puzzles and Skulltula really kept up the energy in me wanting to complete it. It's not the best Zelda game out there, but at least it was different to break up the repetition from Ocarina of Time, so I'm grateful for those aspects when it comes to dungeon design and Skulltula hunting. As for the negatives, I've already explained the huge gaping flaw in this game for me. It's extremely old to me. This game came out around 19 years ago. I am sick of Ocarina of Time. I don't want to play this game ever again, and I promised myself I wouldn't about 5 years ago, and I've kept true to that promise. It's the only Zelda game I haven't played within the 3 months because I know the game inside and out, and up and down, and left to right, and wherever. It's driving me crazy! Do you know the song Let It Go by Frozen? It's a good song, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of us can agree that the overwhelming hype for that song was what drove a decent amount of people to not liking that song anymore to the point where they got sick of it. Now picture those pissed off feelings, and now you've got a firm idea of why Ocarina of Time doesn't appeal to me anymore. I've been around it so bloody much, it's just... Yep, I gave Oracle of Seasons a run for its money in playing it along with Oracle of Ages these past few months, and nope, I do not have burnout here. I oohed and awed at every environment here along with the help of the seasons. The dungeons, loved them all without question, and it didn't flatline the experience anywhere during the adventure. The items got me giddy and bouncy like a little kid, and the music, oh, definitely one of the best soundtracks in the series. But of course, one thing at a time. As you know, Oracle of Seasons is dead famous for being more action-oriented than the sister game, Oracle of Ages, focusing way less on puzzles with logical thinking and focusing way more on the practicality with its items and getting your hands dirty with some intense combat. It might be true that Oracle of Ages can get outdated with its puzzles because they can age the more you get accustomed to them. But from my perspective, it's harder to outdate that raw action from Seasons. It's about getting engorged into that riveting energy. The versatility of your items keeps that combat accessible and alive. And I'll admit it, my action gamer bias does flavor my judgment, but by goodness is it a delicious flavor to munch on. Let's start with the two overworlds, and it has a unique concept to them not implemented anywhere else in the series: Holodrum and Subrogia. In every other Zelda game that involves portals, time travel, or whatever, the two worlds are mirrored off of each other. However, Holodrum and Subrogia are completely different and distinct from each other, and they have their own contrasting identities. One is the normal environment affected by seasons. The other is gushing lava constantly. One uses rupees for currency. The other uses ore chunks to pay for stuff. And the mannerisms between humans and Subrogians is surprisingly interesting, but in a good way. It adds to the exclusive exploration being presented here. Next is the dungeons. As promised, forget the puzzles. Oracle of Seasons focuses on gauntlets of enemies, and it's a test of your reflexes. On paper, it doesn't sound like an innovative idea, but think about this for a second. Remember the Stalfos from the Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time? That was fun. It was engaging and suspenseful. Would you say that took away from the immersion of the Forest Temple? A Link to the Past has some fast-paced action going on. Would you say that was something that took away from the experience? Heavens no. Combat doesn't have to carry around the stigma that it's brainless slaughtering and maneuvering that doesn't carry much potential. When it comes to swimming pools, you can only see the surface. If you don't dive in to check underneath the water, you may not know what's hiding underneath the surface for yourself. I adore every single dungeon, and a decent amount of it is because of this next part. The items are hands down the best in the series in my opinion. It's either because they carry a whole different league of being unique, or they expand on existing weapons never before seen in the series or has done it since. For instance, the magnetic gloves. It may be true that it is identical to the hookshot in helping you cross over gaps, but it brings a powerhouse of a concept to also push yourself away from the target and can switch between pushing and pulling at the push of a button. It can somewhat get thrilling having to keep an eye between using the positive or negative magnetic field. It puts you on the spot. Next is the magical boomerang, where you can control its flight path in real time. This thing is just wild, powerful, practical, and just screams fun as you watch it go rampant. It really speaks something if you have more fun with an item than using your sword. Lastly, the Rock's Cape, which is pretty much a controlled double jump, adds to Link's combat versatility and dodging maneuverability in a top league of its own. Ever since getting the Rock's Cape, it's hard to put the item away because it's so damn fun and useful in combat. And the last positive point I'll make briefly is the music. I mentioned it in Oracle of Ages, and it's way better here. I remember playing this game the first time, and I remember the Tarm runes and the sword and shield maze cementing itself as being something really special for me. Both on playing this game my first time, and it has held up. It's really good. It's really special. I love it. I adore it. I love this soundtrack. So, are there any negatives? Not really. Overall, I had a blast with the game, but if I had to pick one criticism, is that I like the Oracle of Ages overworlds better than the Oracle of Seasons one, but it's not a big one. At a few points, it does feel empty not having too many landmarks to distinguish a lot of things, and it does get noticeable. Other than that, if you haven't played the Oracle games, I highly recommend them to you, along with Link's Awakening. If they're not for you, then that's fine. With 20 awesome Zelda games, some are going to soar up high, and some are going to come down low. Happens to all of us. Thank you! Thank you! Thank you! Oh, finally! You know what? Disappointments are the worst, especially when there isn't anything to replace that gap from your satisfaction. Do you remember me saying way back when in the number 18 entry Four Swords Adventures that I missed more than anything that I couldn't play the game with my friends? Well, Triforce Heroes finally brought my soul back together. I can play with people again. Yes! Unfortunately, I'm going to be spending my time defending this entry rather than talk about the positives in great detail like I did in number 16, Majora's Mask. But number 5 is an interesting position. Are you sure you want to hear it? It's such a long explanation. Alright, let's go. Got to cover all my corners, I guess. So obviously, there are 2 elephants in the room right now that are so big that it'll blow the house down. First, about Link Between Worlds. I mentioned that it was the top-down perspective along with the 60 frames per second giving me an identity crisis to Gauntlet that made the game disorienting to play. So, Triforce Heroes is kind of inheriting that blood, so what's the deal with that? Fair point. Now, I want to note, this is the most infuriating thing for me in this countdown to figure out. Have you ever come across one of those phenomenons where things just happen to happen around you and you couldn't for the life of you explain it? For example, the white and gold dress or the blue and black dress controversy. So, both games look similar, have 60 frames per second, but yet Link Between Worlds made me so squeamish to play it, while Triforce Heroes wasn't doing that at all. So I went on a quest and played both games back and forth until I figured it out, because I was confused too and it made no sense. I switched to Link Between Worlds. I hated it. I switched to Triforce Heroes. I loved it. Link Between Worlds. So cringy. Triforce Heroes. I adored it. Ugh. Why the hell is this happening to me? So, I decided to stare at Link Between Worlds until I got uncomfortable so that I could pinpoint what was happening, and I pinpointed the problem. It happens whenever I moved. I then looked over at Triforce Heroes and watched the camera move and I finally see it! I see now why I dislike Link Between Worlds so much along with the Gauntlet thing. I noticed with Link Between Worlds that the camera was way more zoomed in, forcing the camera to move rapidly to adjust to Link's ludicrous speed due to the large frames per second. However, with Triforce Heroes, the camera is zoomed out to see more of your surroundings from the environment and teammates, thus the camera did not need to rush to keep up with your Link. So this must mean that the combination of the 60 frames per second, the zoomed in camera, and the sudden jerking of the faster camera from Link Between Worlds gives me some form of motion sickness. It makes sense. Link Between Worlds is a damn fast game. In Triforce Heroes, the camera is more zoomed out, relaxed, and moves a lot slower for my eyes to adjust. A whole lot easier with the 60 frames per second. Yes! I finally figured it out! Yes!
Oh, don't worry, Jason. Those bonus stages from Sonic 3 give me motion sickness too. You're not the only one.
Oh, hey Warren. It's true, some of us can get motion sickness whether we like it or not. The second elephant in the room is that I put Triforce Heroes above a lot of the Zelda games. And some Zelda players will understandably say, Zelda is about single player. It's about exploring the world. It's about dungeons. This isn't exactly on the same scope as the other Zelda games. True, and I think this is where I'm different from some Zelda players. Because Zelda is focused on single player, it's a lot easier to criticize it for something it usually doesn't do. That's true, but, and this is a big but, I love multiplayer games a lot, and I don't think you realize how much I do love them. You know Mario Party? I would rather play any of those games over a Zelda game any day. Yep, Super Smash Brothers. Ooh, Pikachu is my favorite character, so I love to send a jolt down my opponent's necks. So yes, the reason that Triforce Heroes earns the legendary status from me is because interacting with other players gets my blood flowing. So, if you want my opinion on how they executed Triforce Heroes on a multiplayer level, it's bloody fantastic. First is that you are required to do your own part with the teamwork because of the item and the set pieces of the obstacles. To me, this is awesome because there's no chances of a third wheel happening here, keeping every Zelda player alert and engaged with what is happening. And hey, it's nice to feel important. The second thing that's awesome about this type of multiplayer game is that it's a different adventure every time, because you are coming across different strangers with different experiences on different levels. So the fun of the replayability is definitely way more unique from other Zelda games, is that no two experiences will be the same. It's a ton of fun experiencing the game in the different situations it can get in. Again, I enjoy the randomness of Mario Party. The third big prominent positive about this game is that it has charm plastered all over it. especially with the emotions you can use to your teammates, like cheering for them or encourage them or even frown at them if they're doing something wrong. And I'll admit it, the charm of this game reels me in and makes me coming back for more. In fact, I'd probably admit that this game is the most charming game for me out of the series. But now, the negatives, at which there are two of them. One is on the single player side and one is on the multiplayer side. When you do this game with one player, you have to use two dummies to get the job done. Now there is a powerful advantage to using the dummies. For example, if you come across a hard challenge, sometimes it's strenuous to rely on other Zelda players. So I'm glad the game gives you the option to do it your way to get the job done. However, this is really taxing because it requires the work of 3 people, so the coordination, it's a nightmare, especially on the time limit and orb challenges. The second negative is in the multiplayer, and it's an obvious one. Every Zelda player who has tried Triforce Heroes knows this all too well. When you're online and on the internet, you come across your share of idiots. You know, I could pull up a big list of potential kinds of buttheads out there in the world, but you get the picture. Sometimes you just get your bad days on the game. Triforce Heroes is still a game I still play rather regularly. Just like Mario Party, I enjoy it for its random adventures and get-together gameplay, and I don't have to do it for challenges or trying to 100% the game. I just do it for fun. There doesn't have to be a long-term goal behind it. Even those negatives I mentioned, it does have its moments, but doesn't place a big burden to keep me away from it. And in the end, it's a lot of fun. And hey, that's the main point of video games, right? And that's good enough for me. Man, has it been awesome to be both a Metal Gear Solid fan and a Zelda fan. Both series, not having done open world sandbox games before, decided to dig in deep, and in my opinion, Metal Gear Solid 5 and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild became the best open world games I've ever played. And this is a big surprise because I do not like nature-based open world games. To explain, I love open world games that are emphasized on civilizations, full of people, like Grand Theft Auto, Saints Row 4, and Infamous. However, I really don't like open world sandbox games that are focused on nature at all, like Minecraft, The Elder Scrolls Skyrim, Fallout 3, or World of Warcraft. To me, it's hard to keep me entertained seeing the same trees, the same dirt, the same grass. My attention span does not handle being monotonous with nature very well. Naturally, this made me really nervous with Breath of the Wild at first because I was afraid that the quantity of the nature environment would overrule the quality of the content found that gives the game its variety. And thankfully, very thankfully, like Metal Gear Solid 5, it pulls off the execution of the exploration in a very surprising and subtle way. This is because the game is vastly more open space than other nature sandbox games. You can climb on top of cliffs, you can scout out across meadows, and most importantly, there's always something entertaining for you to do in the vicinity, like head to enemy camps, put markers on shrines, or find some random thing out of the blue. The game's amount of content in it matches the amount of open space around you, and that's the defining factor for me. But now, time for my interpretation of the game. So, everything is going to hinge on the open world, at which I have positives, things I don't care about, and negatives about. Let's start with the positives, and I'll be repeating myself a little bit here. First, I'll say that Breath of the Wild does deliver its full potential on exploring the environment, as I mentioned. One thing I'm especially grateful for is that there's always something interesting when you're scanning the landscape to go from one event to the next, thus keeping the pace steady and entertaining. That's usually a big problem I have with open world games, is that there isn't much to do except walk for several minutes in boring nature areas. Thankfully, Breath of the Wild doesn't do that. It keeps the game experience fresh by constantly making you work for something, so I appreciate that. I want to emphasize that because Breath of the Wild is in the top of its game in doing this, and it's important for those who find nature monotonous. Shrines and the little things that pique your curiosity are also a big positive, as they provide variety to the flow of the gameplay, going back to the puzzles of Zelda and giving you rewards, and you can feel that achievement high as you hunt down the landscape looking for them. It feels good to get a new piece of equipment, it feels good to get more powerful, and it feels good to slowly unravel the world, giving it that perfect pace. Overall, the experience is nice, and it's enough to jump it up to number 4. It was fun, it had its moments, and it kept me entertained for the time I played it. I was glad that I played it through, and I was surprised that I did enjoy it as much as I did, because I'm rather reserved with open world games like this. Like Metal Gear Solid 5, it was surprisingly well executed. Next, let's focus on the things I don't really care about, meaning it's neither a positive or a negative thing. Like I said, I just don't care about it being there. The food system is, whatever. I personally, meaning just me, don't see the appeal to group together random pieces of food to make the game immersive. It's like Metal Gear Solid 3. I pick up dead animals and I eat whatever comes into my inventory, and it isn't as deep as it makes it out to be. If it isn't very thought-provoking, then I'm not into it. If you think it is and it's something you find praiseworthy, then cool, more power to you. But I don't think it's a mechanic that revolutionizes the game, in my opinion. I also don't care about the weapons constantly breaking every enemy or so, and here's why. This is because I've played plenty of video games, usually stealth games, which I love, that have carried this mechanic's execution similar to this. So I'm guessing it bled over to me not caring about weapons breaking and constantly changing them. For example, The Last of Us. I asked myself this question: how often do you have 1 to 3 bullets in a gun and constantly switch to another weapon with 1 to 3 bullets in it after running out of ammo? Just like the food system, I think it's a very uninspired system, but not one that pet peeves me personally, even though I can easily see how it can irk others. But now, this is where the negatives come in. Sorry to break it to you, but I'm a pro and con guy, not someone who blindly worships in the positives. So here we go. Now, a lot of open world video gamers will say content and the size of the world is everything in the enjoyment of a video game, no questions asked. And more power to you if you enjoy the game in this manner. And admit it, as soon as they heard that Breath of the Wild was going to be a sandbox game, they were ready to give it 10 out of 10s without question. But this is where I have to disagree, and where open world games are good, but they're not exactly my thing, and here's why. More content does mean more playtime, but it also means that the experience just streamlines together and loses memorability. So let's have a contest of memorability with Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild. Twilight Princess has 9 dungeons. Breath of the Wild has 120 shrines in it. I bet you more Zelda players can name all 9 dungeons in Twilight Princess and describe them with great detail. The Forest Temple, the Goron Mines, the Lakebed Temple, the Arbiter's Grounds, the Snow Peak Ruins, the Temple of Time, the City in the Sky, the Palace of Twilight, and Hyrule Castle. Now, do you honestly think that more Zelda players will tell me about all of the 120 shrines, what their names are off of the back of their hand, and what each of them are like? No, and this is Breath of the Wild's fatal flaw. This is the problem with open world games. You can appreciate the vastness and the openness of the world and the shrines, that's true, but it boils down to a quantity over quality experience at the end of the journey. In fact, I'm going to take a thoughtful guess here, and I'm sure some Zelda fans will get pissed at me for saying it, and some others who will agree with me, because I've talked to some Zelda fans about this who did agree with me. I don't think Breath of the Wild is going to age well for some Zelda fans when it comes to replayability. That's a bold claim, so I better back that up. Zelda is outstandingly known for being extremely memorable in the series for each game. Each game in the series, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, Zelda players can connect and remember a lot of those experiences because they've spent some quality time getting connected with the various concepts, like the dungeons for example. That in turn makes the game as a whole much more better to have quality fun times with, and you remember it vividly. Now with Breath of the Wild, the grass, the cliffs, the water, the slopes, sure you can say they are beautiful, but they're generic as all hell. And there's little sentimental value you can put on anything specific. The entire experience is streamlined and very little things will stand out to you in a unique way. As for me, I will not play Breath of the Wild again for a long time after I'm finished with it. All that I will remember it for is a 50-hour nature hike Zelda game and nothing more. But a really fun one, I'll give it that. That makes all the difference and why it is my number 4 game. You know how they say that graphics aren't everything? Well, in this case, to me, content isn't everything. Every gamer has their favorite type of environmental level. You don't really have to explain why, our eyes just naturally like what it sees. If you ask me what my favorite kinds of levels are, hands down I will say train levels. I love train levels and adored them since I was a kid. Uncharted 2, bloody hell yeah, my favorite moment in the series. GoldenEye 007, ooh, the train level. Oh yeah, that is a favorite of mine. Yeah, if you're a Zelda fan and like trains, well, let's just say it's easier to tell who my true Zelda friends are. I'll leave it at that. Now, usually I would start off gaggling and drooling over what I generally think about Spirit Tracks, but this time I better start with the most controversial part about Spirit Tracks, trains. And those are reasonable doubts to have. The train does indeed limit exploration. It does take time to get from one destination to the next, so yeah, I'd love to address those issues and my personal interpretations on it. So let's do this Q&A style. I'll answer the most common criticisms that Zelda players usually have with the train system, okay? So let's start on the first question. Question number 1. I really don't like trains generally, such as in Uncharted 2 and GoldenEye, and this goes for Spirit Tracks. And my answer to that is, that's a fair point. I don't generally like boats at all. You can't control your preferences. Question number 2. It takes a really long time to get from one destination to the next. How do you enjoy this? It's just a chore. My answer? Then let me ask you a question. Do you consider it fun sitting in the boat in Wind Waker and waiting to get to your destination, or do you consider that a chore? Of course, if you enjoy Wind Waker, you know that you don't mind the waiting because you're having a blast traveling in the ocean. So, if I love being in trains, I'm thrilled just being there, being part of the experience, so the criticism of the waiting gets cancelled out. Just like those who enjoy Wind Waker sailing. Question number 3. The junction system limits the exploration. Isn't Zelda supposed to be about exploration? My answer, true, but the fun of the strengths of a Zelda game can sometimes cancel out the weaknesses of a Zelda game. Again, this comes back to the Majora's Mask example I touched on in Phantom Hourglass. Just because Majora's Mask has the weakness of the 4 dungeons doesn't automatically mean it's going to get spat on by some Zelda players because the strengths of the side quests compensate for that. So my love for traveling in trains compensates for the lack of exploration. I adore trains too much, so I don't care. I think that's it. If you have any specific questions, you can ask me in the comments and I'll answer them, but that's far from the only positive going on here. As I mentioned in Phantom Hourglass, I love the stylus controls. Just whenever I pick up this game, just total immersion soakage and I get lost into this game for hours and hours on end. The sword controls work great and are really responsive. The items are dead fun. And how it correlates with Zelda's movements in the Tower of Spirits, I'm going to die of fanboyism, aren't I? But I guess if I died before I got to the last 2 entries, that would be kind of anticlimactic, so I guess I better calm down. Now, I want to talk about Zelda, because Zelda, for the first time, gets fully involved into the plot of what's going on by becoming a controllable character throughout the Tower of Spirits. You start to care about her a lot more than any other Zelda game. She is not a passing one-dimensional set piece to talk to. She transforms into a living, breathing, 3-dimensional person that has positive and negative feelings, who jokes around, and all sorts of stuff. It's one thing to have a Zelda companion who just tells you to do stuff. It's another thing when your companion is on the front lines as much as Link is, and that is just admirable. The last thing I'll cover is the dungeons, the Tower of Spirits, and the music. I went back through this game throughout the last 3 months, and they're still the best out of the best when it comes to the 2D Zelda games. No, I'm not kidding when I mention that. I imagine a lot of that is biased because of the stylish controls by themselves, but I don't care. Either way, the bottom line is that this is the top of the charts for being fun for me. And at the end of the day, that's what video games are supposed to be. Fun. No other variables matter past that. And now, the negatives. None. There isn't any for me. The positives are highlighted so much that they flush out any negatives I feel from the game. True, I am a pro and con guy, as I mentioned in Breath of the Wild, but if I honestly brought up a negative and said it bothered me, then I would be lying to you. I can't do that. Sometimes all the positives can overrule all the negatives for a person sometimes. Hey, this is in my top 3 Zelda games. We're dealing with the big dogs now. Now, we covered my favorite 2D Zelda game. Now on to the best 3D Zelda game I've ever played and is very special to my heart. Now, I imagine that since this is number 2 and my favorite 3D Zelda game, that you're expecting me to slobber and gush all over the positives relentlessly. But no, I've actually got some issues with Twilight Princess, so I'll address those first. First thing to say is that the potential for exploration and how you are led from one location to the next is completely ass in this game. If you reflect back as you're traveling through Twilight Princess, how often do you find yourself being led by a carrot on the stick trope, or forced to go in one specific direction to progress? There are not branching decisions to make as you travel through this world. You are on one fixated path. It does break this rule for a small moment from time to time, but it's jarringly noticeable. The other problems is that the overworld and the side quests are just flat out bad. There's a big overworld, true, but it feels really barren because the other cities and towns in them are really small, are few in number, some are deserted, and have insignificant populations, so the world doesn't feel alive because you don't interact with a lot of people, or there isn't a lot of people. It's too spaced out to feel immersive in that department. And the side quests, some of them feel so tacked on, it feels like a first grader's glue project. That's it with the negatives. So at this point you're probably wondering, that's quite a few negatives. Why is this game so high? Okay, fair point. So let me ask you this. Despite that the Water Temple is considered one of the worst dungeons ever in Ocarina of Time, do you think a Zelda player doesn't have the right to rank it as their favorite 3D Zelda game? No, it isn't a battle of positives versus the negatives. It's a battle of how well the positives outshine the negatives. And the positives in Twilight Princess? The reason I got into Zelda in the first place ever since Ocarina of Time is because of the different variety of environments. And that's how I've always lived by Zelda. Other Zelda players could argue that the items are the most fun and define Zelda overall. I do not. Other Zelda players could say that the side quests are the most important thing. I do not. Other Zelda fans could say the same about the exploration. Same answer. Whenever I think of the opening to Goron Mines, whenever I see this rising geyser of magma, my heart melts and oozes. Whenever I stare out over Lake Hylia in its full glory of water, there is an elation that can't be described. Whenever I think about the final confrontation with Ganondorf, I have no doubts in my mind that this is what this series represents for me to the core, through and through. But, of course, it's not just environments, but the massive attention to detail. It makes the game look a lot more grittier and adventurous. Like, for example, when you get into encounters with some enemies, they look threatening, they look like something out of a Dungeons and Dragons fairy tale novel, and that's just so cool. It has a strong fantasy setting for the experience and graphical detail. It just screams adventure way better than any other Zelda game in my opinion. Next, the items. Many Zelda players could say that practicality is the most important thing here. Fair point. I just criticized that from the Skyward Sword items, and I think collecting the masks in Majora's Mask is a waste of time since you only usually use them for one specific event. So, that's a fair criticism here. You can sense the butt coming. but they are badass, ambitious, and fun concepts. No, I'm not going to say the spinner is a lame generic item. I'm not going to say that controlling a 20-foot statue is a, oh, been there, done that thing. I'm not going to say that carrying around a big ball of chain is as fun as throwing a baseball. You may disagree with me, and that's fine, but I seriously don't care about the impracticality here. I care a whole lot more about the ambition put into these items. The Twilight Realm, I'm kind of middle ground on. I don't like it, I don't hate it. I don't like it because it's not a really ambitious concept because Wolf Link controls exactly like the normal Link does, and he plays hide and seek with some bugs. But at the same time, I don't hate it because it isn't tedious and it gets the job done. If it had broken mechanics, then I wouldn't be a fan of it. But it flows nicely and there's no big hassle behind it. The Twilight aesthetic itself is alright. I appreciate the change of pace since I like the flavor of different environments. Lastly, let's talk about the story overall. Now, I'm going to be frank. You might have noticed that I haven't talked about stories throughout this countdown, and that is because I don't care about them in this series because it doesn't have any groundbreaking standards with it compared to other series. About what is happening to the world in the Twilight Realm, don't care. Don't care about the people, don't care about Zant, don't care about Zelda, none of that. Remember me talking about not caring about what happens to the people in Majora's Mask? Yep, same thing here. But I do care about character development, and Twilight Princess has plenty of that, starting with the slow start. Now, I understand that the slow start and cutscenes pisses off some people. Zelda is gameplay oriented, not cutscene oriented. But because I personally grew up with the Metal Gear Solid series, I actually like the attention to Link's character here before his adventure begins. I actually enjoy the goat herding. I love the interaction that Link has with the kids. In other Zelda games, except for Skyward Sword, all we know about Link is zero. He just picks up his sword and goes, so we never know anything about him. I appreciate the time that Twilight Princess puts in to establish Link's background, along with the other characters throughout the adventure. I'd love to talk more about this game in detail, but I've covered the general points I like about it. Twilight Princess does have some negatives, but they just get buried on top with the huge overwhelming positives I just talked about. And as I've said in the 2014 list, Twilight Princess could be your favorite 3D Zelda game. It could be your worst 3D Zelda game. But as a Zelda fan, I respect your opinion either way and you have my full support. Different things will appeal to you, but in the end, we all love Zelda, and that's what matters. Let's see, I put about 1,000 hours total into all of the Warriors series. I put about 500 separate hours into the Legend of Zelda series. So when I heard that the two series were going to get together to make a hybrid baby, I'm actually not surprised. Dynasty Warriors is shaking hands with series left and right. Samurai Warriors, Warriors Orochi, Gundam, Pokemon, Zelda, and now I've heard they're doing Fire Emblem. So, ready to hear Hyrule Warriors from a Dynasty Warriors expert? So there are two things I'll go over for this entry. Number one, what is a Warriors game and who will this series appeal to? And number two, how to get the most enjoyment out of Hyrule Warriors for the newcomer or veteran Warriors player. Warriors is a tactical hack and slash ganking series. In fact, those three terms and how they work together is what defines Warriors. The tactical part works with the hack and slashing works with the ganking, and the ganking ties it back to the tactics. If you looked at these concepts by themselves, at which skeptics sometimes do, then this series isn't for you. For example, if someone says, oh, you just press the same buttons over and over again, then the skeptic is looking only at the hack and slashing and not at the other two flavors, tactics and ganking, to make the game immersive. You see the pattern? You need to appreciate all three elements at work here to enjoy a game like this. So, in Warriors, you play the overpowered character of the battlefield. You have two roles. Number one, to gank offensively, or number two, to gank defensively. To define what ganking is, it means it's your job to wander the battlefield as the overpowered character and ambush the weaker officers across the battlefield to stop them. Sounds easy, right? Well, on the easier difficulties there probably is, but this is where the offensive and defensive part comes in. On the offensive front, it's your job to work with your teammates to go complete your various objectives, whatever they may be, to win the battle. But the enemy isn't going to lay on their back and let your team assault them. They're going to come up with a number of backfiring strategies that will cause your team trouble. This is where the defensive side comes in. To explain this, you do have your objectives to slaughter the enemy on the front lines, but you will get a game over if the main commander is killed on your side, sometimes when the main headquarters is captured, or if the enemy succeeds on a certain objective. This is what I meant in saying that you have to juggle whether it's the best time to gank on the offensive or the defensive sides. They both involve a variety of tasks that pulls you away from your other duty. So it's up to you to determine which side of the fence needs more attention when the pressure builds. So let's say you're in a certain scenario where on the offensive side you're close to killing the enemy main commander, but it takes a while to kill him or her. And then on the defensive point, your main commander calls for help because he or she is getting overwhelmed. Do you hope to charge in and kill the enemy main commander faster than when your enemy is doing the same to you? Or do you retreat feeling more confident you'll get to your side's commander in time and safeguard yourself from a game over? Choices to make, and you've got to make them on the spot. That pressure is what makes Warriors so intriguing to play. If any of this doesn't sound appealing to you, it's likely that the Warriors series is not up your alley, and that's fine. Different strokes for different folks. Now let's get to my second point. How does Hyrule Warriors stack up to being fun for the newcomer or the veteran Warriors player? This is where I've got to be blunt. If you played every Dynasty Warriors game religiously like I have, then Hyrule Warriors won't last you very long in being entertaining, because it's overwhelmingly easy. The premise of it being Zelda is an awesome time, don't get me wrong, and it will hold you over for a while. But a big appeal to the Warriors series is its difficulty. Compared to a lot of Warriors titles, Hyrule Warriors, to be frank, ranks up there to being one of the easiest out of all the Warriors games. If you're a veteran, you'll breeze through this story with laughably little conflict because you know the ins and outs of the mechanics of the game so well, it'll be like flicking the light switch on in your room. Even the Grand Adventure mode, which is pretty much reflected from Dynasty Warriors 7's Conquest mode, is so damn cringe-worthingly easy, it could come off as a very underwhelming title for veterans who want that juice of difficulty, and it did it for me. It was somewhat underwhelming. So here's what I recommend. If you're a newcomer to the whole Warriors series or want a little dip of what Dynasty Warriors is like, I highly recommend buying Hyrule Warriors on the Wii U and without the DLC. Look, I played around 1,000 hours into the series. Newcomers have not. So what will rub off on me as old-fashioned will turn out to be fresh, invigorating, and exciting for the newcomers. That's the way it is. Newcomers and experts look at things differently. But veterans, heed my call, for I have a solution that will transform Hyrule Warriors into one of the best out of the Warriors games. While I highly recommend the original Hyrule Warriors from the Wii U to the newcomer, for veterans or for those who found Hyrule Warriors in terms of difficulty rather underwhelming, go buy Hyrule Warriors Legends on the Nintendo 3DS or go buy the DLC packs for the Wii U. This is where the magic begins. So, when I say Hyrule Warriors Legends on the Nintendo 3DS, I'm also talking about the DLC pack because it's a mouthful to keep saying both games. Also, I prefer Hyrule Warriors Legends on the 3DS because it has a few more solid mechanics than the Wii U version. Hyrule Warriors Legends is where the godlike potential of the Warriors series comes to life. Look at this. It includes the story mode and adventure mode the original has, which is the easy mode. But this is where Legends starts to ramp the game higher in terms of difficulty to appeal to the veteran players. Not only from increasing the enemy's health and from the increasing demand of objectives, but also because the further adventure maps add limitations to your character, and there are new objectives and activities added to adapt to keep the game fresh and original. Legends comes with way more adventure maps, starting with the Great Seas map, which comes with new Wind Waker maps, new Zelda characters, and it pushes the game into the medium difficulty zone, which is a beautiful change of pace from the easygoing execution from earlier. But oh no, it's just getting started. After you beat the Great Seas map, you unlock the Master Quest map, which is the hard mode, which will give faithful Warriors players like myself a huge run for their money, and you will start to lose some missions. There are even missions here where you are not allowed to get hit once. Holy but I'm not done. After you beat the Master Quest map, you will unlock the excruciating difficult maps called the Twilight and Termina maps. Your characters need to be highly leveled, around level 80 or so, have their best equipment with possibly level 3 weapons, and you need to be in your A game to make some progress here. Lastly, there are more DLC maps for both versions. Koholint Island map, which is based from Link's Awakening. The Grand Travels map, which reflects from Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. The Lorule map, obviously from A Link Between Worlds. And a harder Wind Waker map. All of these DLC maps have high difficulties, legendary weapons for you to unlock with your characters, and more characters to level up. And in my opinion, worth every penny for the DLC content. And this is why Legends is my favorite Zelda game. Not only because of the Dynasty Warriors legacy and gameplay, but because Legends expanded on the original in an outstanding, overwhelming way in terms of game time. In expanding on the game mechanics from the original Wii U version, such as switching characters in game, and gave us veterans a real treat. Giving us around 200 hours of stuff to play with, you can't deny that this is the coolest thing you could do for a faithful Zelda player and a faithful Warriors player. Come on guys, this is my dead winner on all fronts that this is the greatest Zelda game ever in my books.